Welcome back. It's been yet another busy week, both locally and internationally, from the death of COPE co-founder and former minister. Now, the emotional testimony as well of Paul O'Sullivan's former assistant, Sarah Jane Trent, also making headlines and also moving, of course, to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. To help us unpack these stories, we're joined by political analyst Professor André Duvenhage, a columnist and former editor, Mathatha Tsedu. And joining us in studio is University of Johannesburg Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership, Dr. Oscar van Heerden, also joining us for this discussion. Dr. van Heerden, I'll start with you. I want to begin with the international picture, if we will. Israel has expanded its strikes inside Iran as the conflict enters another week now. From a geopolitical and diplomatic perspective, how precarious is this moment?
It's an absolute disaster. You know, Ntlantla, the truth of the matter is that everyone has advised the Trump administration not to enter into this war. However, as we now hear, it's unfolding slowly, but as far back as December last year, Prime Minister Netanyahu went to go and visit President Trump at Mar-a-Lago, his estate, and already planted the seed that there is no room for negotiations with the Iranians. We need to overthrow the government and so forth. And yet what is puzzling is that the Trump administration, yet again for a second time, deceived the Iranians, gave the impression that there is talks about peace. And according to Oman, who were the facilitators of the latest round of negotiations, good progress was being made. They were about to sign on the dotted line. And the very next day, illegal aggression, act of aggression against the state of Iran, in which now we have learned the supreme leader and other leaderships in Iran was assassinated and killed. And somehow the Trump administration is now acting confused because they thought the country would implode and fall apart. And this is simply not what's happening. And now we hear a lot of different messaging, a lot of different excuses. Was it about nuclear weapons? Was it about regime change? Was it about ballistic missiles, etc.? And so the Trump administration, quite honestly, is coming across as completely confused.
I want to play a bite now where President Cyril Ramaphosa has also weighed in on the escalation tensions between Israel and Iran. Very interesting. He's called for restraint and calling for a diplomatic solution as well. Let's listen in.
In the end, whenever there's turmoil around the world, we always find that we in the South become a safe passage. And we will give safe passage for goods and for ships that can come via our shores. So we are so safe and solid when it comes to that. South Africa is always ready to play a contributing role, either in mediation or whatever. And if a gap opens or if we are asked, we always live up to obligations. We're a global citizen and we therefore can play whatever role the UN would like us to play. We have issued a clear statement that we want a ceasefire. We want this madness to come to an end. And Donald Trump is very busy right now. He's got a war on his hands. And obviously, if the opportunity were to open, we would talk and say, there must be a ceasefire. Dialogue is always the best way of ending conflict and then ending war. And we want this war to come to an end immediately. We're losing too many lives, and unnecessarily so.
Mr. Tsedu, let me bring you in. We've just heard from President Cyril Ramaphosa effectively calling for diplomacy there. How influential would you say South Africa's voice is, especially in conflicts of this scale?
No, I think South Africa's voice is really zero, because whoever can say something that can stop this war has to be somebody who can convince Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. And those two people are not going to listen to Mr. Ramaphosa. So South Africa's own voice, it's a thing. Maybe.
Oh, Mr. Tsedu's line, not the best there. Maybe as we return to Mr. Mathatha Tsedu, I'll speak to Professor Duvenhage as well. So, Professor Duvenhage, Israel has also warned it could target whoever, for instance, succeeds Ali Khamenei. Let's speak about this. Does rhetoric like that suggest that the conflict may escalate even further?
It is going to depend on whether what is the extent of the arsenal that Iran still has in its possession. How long can it continue to hit back? If they still have enough, then this is going to get worse. But if they are getting depleted, then it may end in a very different way.
Professor Duvenhage, let's bring you in. We're also hearing reports of drone and missile activity across the Gulf region. Are we already seeing the beginnings of a wider regional conflict, if you will?
Well, I think if we would like to analyze the situation in the Middle East, you can do it on two levels. The one level is the level of discovery, and the other one is the level of justification. Now, I'm only going to focus on the level of discovery. There's no doubt that the Americans and the Israelis has had huge successes, military speaking, in the last number of days. There's also no doubt that the war escalated to a number of states, even involving countries like Turkey, the Gulf states, and Pakistan in a way. So there's no doubt that the potential is there for escalating. At the same time, we need to consider the fact that there is not a single state, maybe South Africa is an exception to the more general rule, that is prepared to support Iran, at least in a military way. Iran seems to me very isolated. Iran hoped for support from the side of Russia and China, and I know there were military support, but they also had hope for more direct and more sophisticated technology to be used in the war against the Americans and against the Israelis. At this point, it is not true. The Israelis are very successful in taking out the leadership of Iran on all levels. As quick as they appoint a new leader, they are taking them out. At the moment, the skies of Iran is relatively open. The Americans are coming in with their B-52 aircraft, and they are basically destroying Iran in many ways. So from a military perspective, there's no doubt that the Americans, as well as the Israelis, is in command. When it comes to political solutions, it's a completely different set of circumstances and different answers you need to give in this regard.
Dr. Van Heerden, reports also suggest that Mosiuoa Khamenei could emerge as Iran's next supreme leader. Let's speak about this. What would that mean for Iran's domestic and foreign policy as we begin talking about succession?
Just before that, Trent, I think it's important to just say that, you know, if I hear everyone talking about the amount of arsenal that Iran has and the Americans and so on, but I think it's important that we must ask the question, even when the missiles are depleted, what is going to happen? Excuse me. Because there's still not going to be a regime change. And this is why Trump and everyone else, pundits and analysts, are saying, unless you put boots on the ground, you are not going to have a regime change. No one is going to surrender. We still have a 90 million population, a very rough terrain. It's not an easy walk in the park as is the case, was the case in Iraq. And you are still going to have a huge military, 1 million strong. So I think people must put these things into perspective. You know, success is also not about how many bombs you can drop on Tehran. My understanding is that the Russians and the Chinese, between last year's 12-day war and this war, they have given the Iranians sophisticated technology. They've given them the ISR systems, for example, which is an integrated system of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. that can do more precision bombing with their missiles and so forth. And of course, the Russians are openly saying that they are providing the Iranians with satellite intelligence, satellite photos to show them the positions of the Israelis and the Americans. So, and you know, China has given them sophisticated weaponry. So for now, it is true that Russia and China is not directly involved, but they have prepared the Iranians quite sufficiently. And that's besides the stockpile that the Iranians have, which there's continuous speculation about how long will they be able to go. So I just wanted to make that point. Right. With regards to your question around succession, you know, the Iranians, I find it a bit strange that they talk of the son of Khomeini, because the Iranians have always been against this issue of royal families and monarchies. You know, they try to move away from that. So I think it would be strange if they are going to decide that the son should take over. I think more likely Arafi is the one that is probably going to step in, but it's speculation. What is important that I want to say about this point is everyone is telling us, Western media, Trump, everyone says that, you know, the command structure, the leadership has completely fallen apart. And yet they are speculating about who's the next supreme leader. And it shows me that there is a constitutional order in Iran. There is procedures in terms of the three-person council. They will decide who is the next supreme leader. And that says to me, and the fact that the president also spoke, the Iranian president, to apologize to the Gulf states, it shows me that there is a structure of leadership that is still operating within Iran.
Mr. Tsedu, let's bring you back in. If tensions continue rising, how might major powers like the US, Russia, or even China, how might they respond?
Well, I hear the Prof and the issue of how Russia and China have armed Iran. And you can see what they've been able to do, which no other state that Israel, for example, has attacked has been able to do. So the Iranians are no pushovers. That has to be accepted. Whether the US is coming with the B-52s and whatever, they are able to hit back. And last night, the first 6 body bags of American soldiers arrived in Washington, D.C. So it is possible that some sense may be spoken into Trump, and there might be some kind of pullback. There's all sorts of stories about the Saudis trying to make sure that oil continues to flow, and therefore they need to get Iran on side. So I'm not really sure what China and Russia will be able to do in this matter, except for the undercover support that Professor van Heerden has been talking about.
Yeah. Professor Duvenhage, I want to return to issues back home now. South Africa is mourning the passing of COPE leader or COPE co-founder Mosiuoa Lekota. What stood out for you, especially about his political legacy?
Well, I was fortunate to meet him at a number of occasions, and I found him a very interesting person. He knows a lot about the struggle. He was part of the struggle in many ways, but as it goes with politicians, they have a certain time frame, and when the term of Thabo Mbeki came to an end, that was basically also the end of Mosiuoa Lekota. He established COPE, and initially COPE was very successful, but due to infighting, there was a steady decline within COPE until I saw Mr. Lekota at Gallagher Estate during the 2024 elections, and he was sitting there as a very lonely political figure, one of a few people that had survived within the COPE structures. But I think he played a very important role in South African politics, also as the first premier of the Free State. And I think he had a strong legacy that he left not only within the ANC, but also with regard to opposition politics. And interesting, he was also very acceptable as person among other communities within South Africa.
Dr. Van Heerden, I'm not sure if I'd be unfair to you as well to speak on Lekota, but speaking about the legacy and history of Mr. Lekota, he moved from the ANC to co-found the Congress of the People. Maybe let's speak to that moment. How significant was that political shift?
No, you're not being unfair. I was at the 2007 Polokwane conference, where Terry Lekota was still the chairperson of the ANC.
Right.
And he tried to chair that very difficult conference because, as you know, already the forces that were supporting Zuma and so on was extremely anti the Mbeki people, and Terry was seen as part of that. I think, I left that conference, went back home, and I said to my wife, it was the first conference, and I've been to all of them except the first one in Durban in 1991, that was not an ANC conference. I don't know what it was worse than a circus. And I think, to a certain extent, that is what gave sort of rise to this decision on the part of Terra and others to create this new party. I think it is the biggest political mistake that he made in his career. He should have remained within the ANC and should have fought within the ANC to make the necessary changes and so forth. And change is difficult. So I do agree with André to a certain extent. I too was at the ICC at that time, IEC, sorry, and I did see here a very lonely figure at that stage. So, but, we don't want to talk about the negatives. He was an amazing activist, amazing anti-apartheid struggle hero. He was principled, and I think that's also why he decided to start COPE. It was out of principle. Because he didn't like at that stage what was happening to the ANC. And rightfully so, we now talk of the 9 wasted years, the Guptas, the corruption, the state capture, and that gives credibility to the principled decision that Terry Lekota took at the time. But still, I maintain it was a mistake.
It was a mistake. Mr. Tsedu, let's bring you in. Many say Lekota stood for principle politics, just like we've heard from Dr. Van Heerden. But he's also a man known to have stood for accountability as well. Do we still see enough of that, especially in today's political landscape?
Not really. But I also wanted to just say that Terra was essentially a good guy. He put his shoulder to the wheel in terms of the struggle for freedom. He did his time on Robben Island twice, came back, and when freedom came, he went into government and did his bit. But he also had what I would call a streak of unpredictability. His views of late around Israel, about apartheid, were really things that were quite puzzling for someone who was a victim of apartheid in the manner in which he suffered. But all of that doesn't detract from the fact that he was a good guy who did his role for us to be free. And right now, in terms of COPE, it's essentially a spent force. But his initial political home, which is the ANC, the kind of values that he espoused around accountability and all of those sort of things are no longer really the currency within the ANC. Everybody seems to be really concerned about what they can get out of whatever position they hold.
Well, when we return, we continue this very insightful discussion with our panel of experts, joined this time by Professor André Duvenhage, columnist and former editor Mathatha Tsedu, and also joining us in studio is University of Johannesburg's Dr. Oscar van Heerden to give us his perspective on a number of issues we'll discuss tonight. Of course, also looking at events at the Madlanga Commission this week and proceedings in Parliament at the ad hoc committee hearing. Sarah Jane Trent as well as Paul O'Sullivan appearing there. We'll have more details in a short while. Let's continue our discussion right now with our panel of experts. A quick reminder, we have Professor André Duvenhage, Mathatha Tsedu as well joining us, and also from the University of Johannesburg, Dr. Oscar van Heerden joining us in studio. Maybe let me continue with you, Dr. van Heerden. We started speaking about the life and times of Mosiuoa Lekota, and with many leaders from the liberation generation passing on, are we witnessing the end of an era, if you will, or a particular period in South African politics?
I think we do. We can agree that we are. You know, it's that time. Most of our leaders, and I mean, Terra was still fairly young, if you ask me, at 77. But a number of our leaders are already in their 80s. And I fear over the next coming years, we are going to be having a lot of state funerals and so forth. And it is the end of an era. Those comrades that were in exile, those that spent decades on the island and Robben Island and so forth, and those that were sort of the beginning, giving us the beginning seeds of our democracy and what it should be. You know, they gave us a fantastic constitution. They gave us all the big things. An independent media, they gave us a judiciary that's fairly independent and so forth. And so the torch now is going to be given to us, the younger generation, to take that forward. So yeah, it is an end of an era. And I think there's lots of lessons to be learned from that era, because also under that leadership, under that cohort, if I can put it like that, we did also see the evil of money, the corruption that crept in. The self-aggrandizement and so forth, the sense of entitlement. And we now see it in the Matlanga Commission as well.
Professor Duvenhage, maybe let's turn there. The Matlanga Commission continues to hear testimony about alleged criminal infiltration into policing structures. And maybe as we begin this discussion, how serious is this moment for public trust?
Well, I think it is extremely serious. And if you listen to the evidence that is coming through, the evidence is clearly indicating that South Africa has a serious problem as far as corruption and endemic corruption is concerned, to the extent that we can talk about the South African state as becoming a criminal entity on certain levels. We have listened how certain names are coming up. Sabia is one of them, Kat Matlala, Brian Molefe, and others. And it seems as if the evidence is relative consistent. The big question, however, to me is, what is the structures going to make with this evidence? And if we look at the ANC government in particular, not a lot came from investigations like the Sereti Commission, like the Morane Commission, and more recently, the Zondo Commission. When it comes to the ad hoc committee, this is a very interesting phenomenon to me. And I'm asking myself a number of questions about the ad hoc committee. One is the question, isn't the Committee of Parliament in a way fulfilling the job what the judiciary is supposed to do? What are the rights of people being questioned there? Can they safeguard these people? And there's a number of issues coming to the fore in this regard. But without any doubt, we have a problem in South Africa, a serious one. You earlier talked about leadership change. I agree with Oscar there about the leadership challenges. But I think there's more at stake than only a leadership and a leadership change. I think in a way, we are looking and seeking for a new paradigm, or at least the new implementation of an existing paradigm to take South Africa forward.
I want us to listen back to some of the proceedings this week, as the parliamentary inquiry also heard from investigator Paul O'Sullivan and his former assistant, Sarah Jane Trent. Very interestingly, both have been accused of impersonating IPID investigators. Let's listen back.
Paul said to Mr. Mahlangu, you can drive in my car, we can all fit into one car.
What car? So you, Paul, and the two investigators
Correct.
traveled in
Mr. O'Sullivan's car.
from where?
From outside the gate of
Okay.
Sable Hills. So, yeah.
Why,
So we
why were
met
you going
there.
there? What were you? What was the purpose of
we
going to Sable Hills?
We were going to show the investigators where Sable Hills and to
show the investigators where Sable Hills?
to go with them and also to see the estate manager so that to get the plans because that would be part of the investigation. That's pretty much what happened. Oh yes, and then
what were you investigating?
The criminal complaint that Paul had laid with the iPad.
What was the criminal complaint?
Of corruption. I don't have it in front of me,
Yeah.
so I'm just talking at the top of my head.
Yes.
Mr. Tsedu, you've just heard from Sarah Jane Trent there explaining their visit to former police boss Khumucho Phahlani's home. What stood out from you from this testimony? I mean, we did see a very emotional Sarah Jane Trent.
Yeah, there were a lot of tears, but also quite clearly, as she was speaking, you could just see how the infiltrated IP'd and essentially taken it over. McBride was in bed. The other guy seems to also have been in bed. And so you wonder the power that Paul O'Sullivan was able to exert in this country during that time, and how I suppose all of us should be very grateful to Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, the general, for being brave enough to come out into the open. Otherwise, this nonsense would have been continuing, really. And it's nauseating, really, when you listen to this and you say, we are a country, we are a state, and these are the institutions that anchor the security of this country, and somebody like an MI6 agent can just walk into this country and then become what he became. What are we really?
What are we really? And maybe that's the bigger question, Dr. van Heerden, as we look back at proceedings. Perhaps what stood out for you as you reflect on some of the proceedings, both at the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc inquiry?
Well, I mean, I in a way also have my reservations as André with regards to the ad hoc committee. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the ad hoc committee is just a soap opera. You know, I don't think they know exactly what is it that they want to achieve. And as a result, we go off on all kinds of tangents about who slept with who and how your posture is and how you speak and how you look and so on, personality clashes and the likes. And I'm sure South Africans are very entertained by the ad hoc committee. But I think the ad hoc committee is a direct result of the Mathatha Commission. The president rightfully decided to institute a commission to get to the bottom of some of the allegations and claims that General Mkhwanazi has made. And it required investigation and to get a sense of how deep the rot goes. And I think the commission is busy trying to do that. But because it was the president and because he is the head of the ANC, the parliament decided they somehow thought that it can be manipulated, the terms of reference, because they have to report to the president and the president only, and he might keep it close, the report and so on and so forth. So they must have their own thing. And that's how the ad hoc committee, as far as I'm concerned, came about, because it's a multi-party parliamentary committee. And you see the dynamics of the different parties. It's just a mockery as far as I'm concerned, because the MK wants to be better than the DA and the DA wants to be better than the EFF and so on and so forth. So I think it's unfortunate what we are observing with the ad hoc committee. There is a bit of tidbits here because we as the public has to connect the dots, as Tsedu is saying, you know. But at the end of the day, the substance, as far as I'm concerned, is with the commission. We see the unfortunate situation of organized criminals and how far and deep their tentacles go, where they can tell generals what to do and what not to do, and how easy it is for our own generals within the SAPS to make sure that certain people are taken care of, are murdered, are assassinated, and dockets are misplaced and so forth. And this is just the police service. We have not even begun with our courts and our judges, and let alone our army and the intelligence services. I think Tsedu is going to immigrate if we get there.
Professor Duvenhage, what does this saga then reveal about the depth of tensions within South Africa's criminal justice and accountability institutions, if you will?
Well, I think the general academic context, understanding the South African state, is that South Africa, to a large extent, is what we like to call a failing state. And that is a state that is both ineffective, inefficient, and work for personal gains, not in terms of the national interest. And that is not only true to the criminal justice system, but is specifically important when it comes to the criminal justice system. And we have seen over years the state capture of the criminal justice system, and as a result of that, a manipulated system. And as mentioned earlier, if we go into this, it can be very, very serious with criminals influencing legal and justice processes. And I think if there is one priority we need to turn around urgently, that is the criminal justice system. To me, this is priority number one, and I hope this will be the outcome of the activities of both the ad hoc committee and the Mashlanga Commission.
Mr. Tsedu, you've got the honor of taking the last bite in our discussion this evening. When you step back and consider some of the topics we've discussed, both the global tensions and domestic developments this week, what would you say concerns you most?
I'm concerned about what the Gulf War impact is going to be on us as a country. And I'm worried about all the shenanigans that are being exposed within the Mashlanga Commission in particular. And lastly, I want to say to Oscar that he's planting a seed in my mind about the possibility of how I can deal with my health, because this whole thing is very debilitating.
Unfortunately, there we got cut a bit while listening back to Mr. Tsedu. But similarly, maybe let me give you the parting shot, Dr. van Heerden. Similarly, what political or geopolitical developments will you be watching very closely this week, in the new week?
I mean, I think for me, I think it's important that we say to South Africans who constantly want to make the assertion that we are in bed with the wrong bedfellows, like the Iranians. You know, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, of International Relations and Cooperation made very clear that South Africa moves from a premise of international law. You know, it was an illegal aggression against Iran, a sovereign state, and therefore South Africa is saying that this war must end. The genocide that is happening in Gaza is illegal and against the UN Charter, and therefore South Africa is saying it must be stopped. And therefore they went to the ICJ. We are guided by international law, and I think it is important that people begin to realize that we are not doing this at our heartstrings or for morality's sake. We want a world that operates within international law, within a framework where there is rules, and America and Israel is operating outside of those rules, and it is unacceptable.
And what's the human cost as well, as we look at tensions like this, but also what can be learned from history?
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, when we have these wars of choice, you know, Trump said that he's a president of peace. He wanted the Peace Prize. He is now the biggest advocate of war in the Middle East, and it's costing a lot of lives. Not only in the Middle East, we look at the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and we are beginning to see tension brewing within the South China Seas, etc. So all round, there is just massive loss of life, and I think that's why the president has opted to use the adjective that it's complete madness, and it needs to stop.
And with South Africa saying that it's ready to mediate if called by the UN?
I agree with Mr. Tsedu. I mean, I think that that would be a level above our grade. I don't think people will take us serious as South Africa. However, I think it is always important that even as a country on the southern tip of Africa, we need to say to the global north that we have a role to play. We can also be of help. And if that is required, we are there. Just like we did with the Africa presidential delegation who went to Ukraine and Russia and said, because, as Mr. Tsedu says, these things do negatively impact on us in terms of oil prices, our energy, and food, and so on and so forth. So we do need to always make sure that even though we are a small player, we must tell the North that we are here and we can contribute something.
Well, gentlemen, let me thank you all for your time this evening. Of course, unpacking some of the leading stories of the week, joined by political analyst Professor André Duvenhage, thanking him for his time this evening. We also had columnist and former editor Mathatha Tsedu, as well as in studio having Dr. Oscar van Heerden giving us his perspective this evening, wrapping up a very insightful conversation. Well, just like that, we've wrapped up this segment and continue with more news and updates at the top of the hour. Do stay with us.